When you start to look at stats like how the year-over-year sales are down, the new listings are up, the inventory is up, and the months of supply is up, you would start to make an assumption that maybe the Calgary real estate market is starting to slow down. Well, when you look at this chart here, you can see that the red bar is continuing to increase every single month. When you're looking at stats online and you're looking at news articles, it's very important to remember that people can take certain things and try to paint a picture. It's very important to get the entire photo before you start to make an assumption. When you look at the year-to-date sales, you can see that we're actually on pace to go to 2022 numbers. We've already beat 2023. We've already beat 2021. I highly doubt we're going to get to 2022 numbers, but we did beat last year. So it's really important to put this into perspective. When you look at the new listings, it is very good to see that we're finally at this 10-year average. Obviously, 2 years ago and 3 years ago, we set new ground with being well above the 10-year average, and people were just trying to dump out of the market when they noticed everything was really busy. Last year, we had a pretty hard time struggling to find new listings, and this year, we've seen a welcoming uptick in new listings, which has helped to offset some of the price growth, but not as much as people were hoping. So, my name's Adam Fyfe, your Calgary Realtor. Welcome to my parents' house. I'm very out of my element here. I've recorded this a few times now. I definitely am trying to find new comfort being able to use the mouse. If you have any questions or if you have any concerns about what's going on in the Calgary real estate market, please go ahead and reach out. If you want to know what your home is valued at in today's market, go ahead and use this prompt here. But without further ado, let's see if I can stumble through this market report. So, this is the Calgary market here. Let's just actually make this a little smaller so I can read it. City of Calgary, June 2003. If you want to read this on your own, just go ahead and skip to the next chapter. I won't be bothered. In a market that continues to show resilience, May saw a total of 3,092 resale home sales. While this figure is nearly 1% below last year's record high, it is a 34% higher than long-term trends for the month. Let's remember, that's not year-to-date, it's per month. The pullback in sales was primarily driven by declines in lower-priced detached and semi-detached homes where there was limited supply choice compared to last year. Although new listings have increased, much of this growth is in the higher price ranges for each property type. Our strong economic situation has supported sales growth in these higher price ranges. However, this month's sales could not offset the declines in the lower price ranges due to a lack of supply choice. Sounds like every other month. New listings in May reached 4,333 units, almost 19% higher than last year. This increase in new listings compared to sales caused the sales to new listing ratio to drop to 71%, supporting a modest year-over-year inventory gain. Despite this, inventory levels remained nearly half what we typically see in May, with most gains driven by homes priced above $700,000. While inventories did improve this month, conditions continue to favor sellers with 1 month of supply. Several districts continue to report less than 1 month of supply, while the city center reported the highest supply to sales ratio at 1.5 months. Seller market conditions drove price growth across all districts in the city. The unadjusted total residential benchmark price for May reached $605,300, nearly 1% higher than last month and 10% higher than last May. Wow. So let's get into it here. So this chart, we're used to seeing this chart. You can see that the price growth is continuing to go on that upwards trend. Yes, we have started to see a little bit of a slowdown, but we're still seeing price growth regardless. It's great to see an inventory increase, obviously, like we just read it in the report. I would guess, especially for those higher price point homes, people are holding off to see what the June 5th rate announcement is going to have in store. There's a lot of speculation that the Bank of Canada will finally start to cut interest rates, which will give people a little bit more buying power and obviously spend less money on interest when they lock into a mortgage. So my assumption right now, depending on what happens, we're going to see an uptick in activity and probably a slight decline in inventory next month. I would imagine that, over the last 2 to 3 weeks of this month, people just kind of slowed down and wanted to stop looking at properties until they knew more about what was going to happen in that rate cut. So we are seeing an increase here, but I don't think it's going to last very long, and that's just my personal opinion. So when we start to look at total sales by price range, you can see that the 7 to $1 million has the most amount of sales. I really don't like this slide because it has 3 $100,000 segments mixed into one stat. If you were to break it down a little bit more, obviously it would just slowly dwindle down. I would imagine the 7 to 800 would have the most, 8 to 9 a little bit less, and a little bit less, but it's really hard to say without actually doing the hard math. You can see everything else is kind of hovering around that 400 to 480 sales per month. Now, when we start to look at sales by property type, you can see that the majority of sales, which makes total sense, is like this every single month, was apartments in city center. You can see that detached homes in south and detached homes in southeast also saw pretty good upticks in sales, getting over 200 and almost 300 sales that month. Now, when we start to look at the inventory, right, this is going back to that written description that we just read. Look at all of the inventory, right, 700 and plus. Calgary has some very nice homes, and they're just not moving as fast as affordable product in Alberta. Alberta, in general, saw a lot of people move here for affordability reasons. Lower taxes, no land transfer tax, house pricing at that time, right? It was really, really low. So you can see that the inventory, actually, oddly enough, is relatively the same between 4, 5, and 6. You got a little bit more for the apartment sector for the almost 500, and then everything else is sitting above that 7. So depending on where you're at in your price point, you just want to make sure that you realize what you're getting into, okay? When we start to look at the new listings, like I mentioned before, it is really great to see a new uptick in listings. Year to date for May, you can see that we finally hit that 10-year average. And when you look over here, you can see that it's basically on a normal trajectory of what we would see even in a very depressed market. 2014 was the last time Calgary saw a very hot market, and you can see that everything else, even after that, basically stayed roughly around that 15,000 year to date new listings. So good to see, better than last year. Hopefully we don't see as aggressive price increases this year, but we'll have to see what happens with that rate cut. Now, start to break it down here. This is the city of Calgary. You can see that every quadrant has seen increases. You can see increases in East Calgary up to 21%, 16% in Northeast. City Center always has the lowest percentage, but they are quite expensive, especially when you start to get to that detached market and so on and so forth. Now, this chart looks a little differently, so when I actually record this in my studio and I get it edited, I actually remove this section here. So you can just ignore this section. I actually don't really look at the month stats compared to last year. I just want to look at the year to date, right? The year to date for me makes the most sense for these video recordings until people start to ask me more detailed questions. So for right now, let's just concentrate here. You can see that total sales year to date, we're up about 11%, okay? When you look at the total sales volume, we're up almost 24% to 7.4 billion. New listings were up around 11%. Inventory, surprisingly, well, I guess not surprisingly, but it is unfortunate. You can see that we're down. Even though when you compare, the inventory again, like I mentioned at the beginning, this month compared to last month, there was actually a decrease in one of the stats before, but in this stat here, you can see that there is a decrease. I don't know what I was going with that. Months of supply is 1.06, so it's actually decreased by 20%. Sales to new listing rate, sales to new listings is 78% here. It's actually the exact same as last year. Sales to list price is up 101. Days on market is down considerable, down to 23 days. And then these numbers here we're not going to touch on because we're going to look at the actual months rather than the year-to-date stats. So just remember that this chart here is a little bit different than what we're going to see in a second. Now, when you look at this chart here, okay, you see the total residential is 605, right? It's up 9%. You got your detached at 761. You got your semi-detached at 678. You got your row at 462, and then you got your apartments. So we see that apartments have actually decreased by $5,700. That's a mistake for sure. I've already reached out to the Calgary Real Estate Board, and I've let them know that there's a mistake on this report, but there's no way that the apartment sector has seen a decrease from last month. So what I did here is I actually went back and I looked at some of the numbers and I did some math, right? When you look at last year's prices and you increase it by the 17.86, which is the technical number, you actually get $351,900. When you look at last month's report and you times it by that 1.49, which you'll see in future slides, it'll say 351. So I'm just calling it out that there's going to be quite a few people and probably some news outlets that see this price, see this decrease, if they do the math, and they're going to say that apartments have decreased, but that is just not the case. It was probably a mistake from someone at the Calgary Real Estate Board. So apartment prices, $351,000, up 1.49%, and we'll get into that in a moment. So let's continue on here. Year-to-date stats for each individual property type. So we're going to kind of break it down here in a little bit more detail. If you want this information personally, go ahead and reach out. I have no problem walking people through this personally. But when you look at the detached, right, the detached year over year sales is only up 5%, which is actually not that much. When you look at the semi-detached and everything else, we're above double digits. So again, a lot of these more affordable properties are seeing a lot more movement. As the detached market starts to get more and more out of reach for people, especially with 5% interest rate, I am not surprised to see it's still increasing, but not increasing that much. It is surprising to see as well new listings. Not a lot of people are actually listing their detached homes. They're just staying in them. You can see that the semis, the townhouses, and the apartments are all seeing pretty large year-over-year increases for their new listings. A lot of people are just trying to get out of the market, sell their investment properties, sell their properties, make moves. I've actually talked with a few people that are actually leaving Calgary, which is pretty ideal for some people who are looking to maximize on this market rather than getting in or getting re-entered into the market. They're just leaving it. So they're getting out hopefully at a high in a sense and then getting out of the market. Inventory, you can see the detached homes, even despite the lower sales and despite the lower increases, they have the largest inventory decrease. They're still people are still very interested in detached homes. It's kind of the American dream, and we're starting to see a larger decrease in inventory. And then months of supply, everything is obviously going to see some decreases, with the largest decreases in the apartment sector. Apartments were very slow for some time, and we're starting to see a lot more movement. So 1.19 months of supply is a very fast market, especially for apartments. I remember the days that apartments were at 6.5, 7.5 months of supply. Very, very slow apartment market. So great to see there. Benchmark prices, if you were curious about the benchmark prices, these are here. Obviously, we're seeing a lot more increases. So this is a very interesting way of doing market reports. This is the very first time that I've done this in the last, let's call it 3 years. So if you have any questions, reach out. This is for the Calgary Real Estate Board written description for each individual property type. If you want to read it, go ahead, pause the video, and skip to the next chapter. So if you want to know what your home is valued at in this market, and it is crazy to see how many people actually use this system, and they put it in every couple of months, and you can see the fluctuations of price point. Obviously, going through and manually doing a home evaluation, like having myself do that for you, looking at some sold comparables in the community, is the best way to do that. But if you watched a quick and dirty exact number, you can go ahead and put it in here. It's me and only me that looks at it. And if you have any information or if you have any concerns with it, you just let me know. So this is interesting. Let's actually make this bigger. So I'm going to actually make myself a little smaller here and then go in a little bit deeper here. So this is the benefit of actually doing this on my computer live. So let's look at some of the months, the microeconomic breakdown for this actual city. You can see that a lot of property types in all of the quadrants are seeing pretty massive growth. So we're just going to jump right to it, I guess. See, again, I'm out of my flow. So we've got all of the increases going on here. Now, one of the things I wanted to jump on with this chart is actually these are incorrect, okay? So when I started to run these numbers, there was a 0.8% increase from last month. Yet, when you compare last month to this month and you do the math, there's a decrease of $1,300, right? There's an increase of 0.9, yet there's a decrease of $2,400. There is an increase of 3%, yet there's a decrease of $100. So this month's report, take it with a grain of salt. There's probably going to need to be an update from the Calgary Real Estate Board. And if there is an update, I'll probably do a mid-month update to make sure that these numbers are correct. We went through and we did the manual increases, but I just don't trust them. I trust the percentages. I don't trust the numbers. So you can see if you look down the percentage column here, every single column, every single row has seen an increase, right? So you can even see a decrease here in the townhouse market as well. So for this month, let's just take that with a grain of salt. When it comes to the hard numbers in this report, the percentages I feel make sense because when I did this other exercise, it worked out quite well for the 351,000. But when I look at the percentages and I mash them over the numbers, it doesn't make sense. So this chart here is interesting. I actually really like this chart. This chart just showcases the year-over-year percentage increase in Calgary. You can see that for the last 3 months, we're still at double-digit price growth month over month, but it has slowed down. You can see that this month here, we're at 10% year-over-year. Now we're at about 8%, right? So we are noticing a slowing down of year-over-year price growth, and I would imagine at least this month here was caused by the rate announcement coming on in the 5th. So it'll be very interesting to see if this line flattens out or if this line continues to go down. We'll have to find out. Stay tuned. Finally, the Calgary Real Estate Board price point. Obviously, we're seeing some pretty gnarly price increases. You can see that the median price has actually slowed down a little bit, but the benchmark price and the average price are continuing to increase at record-setting paces. Even with that rate announcement coming up in the next few days, we are seeing quite a bit of new activity coming to the market and quite a bit of people buying up the product. So thank you very much for getting through this with me. It was an honor and a pleasure. And if you have any recommendations or suggestions, I'm all for it. So we'll see you on the next one. Peace.